We begin this hour with the state of confusion over President Trump's war with Iran. It appears we'll see what happens, is the official word from President Trump, as the U.S. is still waiting for a response from Iran on the U.S. proposal for a permanent end to the war, which was expected yesterday. That, of course, has not happened, even as the pause in hostilities that the White House calls a ceasefire has been increasingly tested. Friday, Central Command said U.S. military forces carried out airstrikes hitting and disabling two Iranian-flagged oil tankers trying to break the American naval blockade. Meanwhile, the United Arab Emirates said Friday it intercepted drones and missiles launched by Iran. It came a day after the U.S. said it intercepted attacks on 3 Navy ships in the Strait of Hormuz and retaliated against Iranian military facilities. The president told ABC News' Rachel Scott that the U.S. response was, quote, just a love tap and not a sign the ceasefire was over. But amid the impasse in negotiations over an end to the war, President Trump's patience running out. Our colleague Jonathan Lemire reports in The Atlantic, according to an outside advisor, President Trump is growing bored with his war in Iran and frustrated with Iran's intransigence. Bored, just bored.
He's been bored for some time.
It's happening. It's been. I think the thing that's so interesting is whether it's bored or he's trying to move on, what he wants people to think is the same thing he wants them to think about their gas prices, is that the reality on the ground is different than the one that they actually see. And you can't convince people of that. We talk about convincing people of take what's leaving their pockets, not being able to convince them of that. You also can't convince people a ceasefire where there's fire happening on land and sea is a ceasefire.
Yeah, I mean, again, the president's been bored for a while, and he clearly wants to get out of this. I mean, more than a month ago, a White House official was telling our Jake Traylor that he's bored and just wants to move on. But the question is, how is he going to move on? Right. And is he going to just say, we've won, and leave without actually getting any of the deliverables on the enriched uranium or on an actual deal around, Iran not having nuclear weapons?
I mean, that is, and I feel a little bit like a broken record, but that's something that my diplomatic sources have consistently said that they're fearful of, that he is at this point so eager to get to a deal that he's going to agree to conditions that are not amenable to the regional allies. But at this point, he is over 2 months into the war. That's obviously far past the 4 to 6 week deadline. And the Washington Post had some pretty interesting reporting this week that Iran still retains 75% of pre-war inventories of mobile launchers and 70% of pre-war stockpiles of missiles. And this all comes, this news, as Trump is waiting out this sort of detente in the Strait of Hormuz, hence the blockade that the U.S. maintains, which, again, is not a ceasefire. It's potentially a cessation of hostilities at most. But as they're waiting for Iran to blink first, this Washington Post reporting indicates that they have at least 3 to 4 months of being able to withstand this blockade.
Despite Trump saying their weapons stockpile is all gone. Joining us now to get into all of this from Dubai is MS Now contributor Inzamam Rashid. Inzamam, thank you as always for coming to the weekend. Let's start there. What are your Iranian sources telling you about whether or not they think this is a ceasefire? It's hard for, I think, a lot of Americans, including those around this table, to understand if there are missiles flying, how can we be in a ceasefire?
Well, I think the proof is in the pudding, right? Because why have we not had an Iranian response yet to the U.S. proposal that was given many days ago now? We were supposed to hear a response on Thursday. We didn't. We were then pretty confident we'd get a response yesterday. Marco Rubio said that he was expecting a response from the Iranians yesterday. We didn't get one. And so we're in 3 days and Iran still hasn't replied to this U.S. proposal to bring a conclusive ending to this conflict. And I think the fact that we have seen fighting in the Strait of Hormuz, we have seen attacks onto the coastline of Iran over the last couple of days, and we've seen, obviously, an Iranian retaliation, not just to U.S. warships in the Strait of Hormuz, but to the UAE particularly as well, then that's why we're not moving forward in this peace proposal, in these negotiations. And remember this latest proposal that the U.S. has put forward, which essentially suggests that within 30 days, we will come to a conclusive ending of this conflict. In it, there is discussions around lifting the blockade gradually of the Strait of Hormuz. There will be discussions around how Iran's sanctions would be released and their assets unfrozen. There's also talk about how Iran would lift their blockade of the Strait of Hormuz, and critically as well about their nuclear program and very specific details about their nuclear program, which they'd all get into if the two sides actually get around the table. And that first will only be done if this initial pre-proposal gets agreed. And right now, Iran is pretty much staying quiet. In fact, due to the fighting that we've seen in the Strait of Hormuz, they said that Washington is vermin-like nocturnal scheming. That was from Iran's foreign ministry, and they warned against adventurism and roguish behavior. This was after a US jet fired on two oil tankers which were heading towards an Iranian port in the Strait of Hormuz, and those two tankers were disabled as a result, as part of the US blockade inside that waterway. So we're in a situation right now where all eyes are on Iran. The ball is seemingly in their courts to come back with a response to this deal. But I think this military action that we've seen extensively over the last few days now just doesn't help us getting to some form of peace proposal. And I just also must mention is that even if they do come back with a response, which won't be completely to apply with what the US has said, this would just be the initial step to then getting to the table, to then having negotiations. Any sort of peace agreement and deal is still very far off.
Imam Rashid, all over the story in Dubai. Thank you so much for your reporting this morning. We are joined now by Alan Eyre, former senior U.S. diplomat and distinguished diplomatic fellow at the Middle East Institute. He was a senior member of the Obama administration's negotiating team for the 2015 Iran nuclear deal. Alan, thank you so much for coming back to the table this morning. I want to stick with these social media posts that we're seeing from the Iranians. You had Abbas Araghchi, the foreign minister, post on X earlier this week that the U.S. is opting for a reckless military adventure over diplomacy. He said that every time a diplomatic solution's on the table, the U.S. opts for a reckless military adventure. Is it a crude pressure tactic or the result of a spoiler once again duping POTUS into another quagmire? Whatever the cause is, outcome is the same. Iranians never bow to pressure. What is your assessment of the state of play right now? And obviously, we've talked a lot about, and the president has said this time and time again, that what the Iranians say publicly needs to be verified, can't necessarily be trusted in full. But I don't know. I mean, what Araghchi is saying makes a lot of sense to me and seems to square with the landscape. What do you make of it?
Well, I mean, both sides are necessarily, when they communicate with the media, they're not trying to impart information. They're trying to spin and influence the course of events. That's to be expected. But, yeah, the reality is there's a very fragile ceasefire. Both sides are interested in flexing. Iran wants to show that it's still controlling traffic through the Strait, and the U.S. is trying to show that it's still trying to blockade Iran's ports. So against that backdrop, the negotiations are still very anemic. Neither side is really interested in serious and sustained negotiations yet. The pain hasn't become so much so that they're saying, yeah, we really need to focus on negotiations.
Alan, I have been stuck, as these two can attest on our calls this week, on the idea of whether or not we're in a ceasefire. The president, just last Friday in Florida, was describing this as a war. Mm-hmm. Now he is describing it as something a little bit different over the last week. Let's listen.
We're in I call it a mini war, because that's all they are. We're in a little skirmish, military. I call it a skirmish because Iran has no chance. I call it a skirmish because that's what it is. It's a skirmish. And we're doing unbelievably well.
After these strikes, is the ceasefire with Iran still on?
Yeah, it is. They trifled with us today. We blew them away. They trifled. I call that a trifle.
He sounds like me trying to convince myself of something that is not fully true and that I want everyone else to believe and myself. Does that seem like the right read to you? Because we're clearly continuing to attack them. We're attacking them at land and sea now over the last couple of days. And I don't know if a trifle is the word that I would use.
Well, yeah, it's clear the U.S. administration keeps trying to bludgeon reality with words, hoping to align it with what it wants to be. It's a war, okay? Is the ceasefire still existing? To an extent. I mean, President Trump has a vested interest in saying the ceasefire is holding because he knows the markets will start spinning if he says there's a war. Plus, he's heading to China very shortly, and he wants to at least have the patina of a solution in place before he goes to those important meetings. So, yes, it's a war. It's a ceasefire, but it's incredibly fragile. And again, as I said, the key reality here is that neither side wants to play with each other yet in terms of negotiating in good faith.
I want to double down on that last thing that the president said, which was he was talking about strikes on American service members and describing them as a trifle when he was talking about the strikes that were taken by Iran against the U.S. This week. Have you, in your experience and your past work for the Obama administration, the fact that an American president is saying that and describing it in that way, do you think any other president could have described it that way and gotten away with it?
No, and that's a great question. It plays into a larger issue, which is President Trump and this keeps sabotaging whatever progress there is by these statements. He's not content to let diplomacy take its course. He issues these inflammatory statements. He says it's a trifle. Of course it's not a trifle. When the UAE gets attacked by Iran, he says it's a nothing, more or less, which alienates the United Arab Emirates. So if this administration could just have some message discipline and allow...
Oh, wow, then.
I'm an eternal optimist, as you know.
Yes.
Then we might have a chance at a negotiated solution. But as it is, we just keep shooting ourselves in the foot.